How does a man best show up and live his best life? And how did I go from being extremely self-conscious to not feeling like an idiot to dare say actually being confident in bed and having sex? And then how does my marriage that is over 12 years now, how do we have a better sex life than we did at the start? And why do I focus on just 4 things that have me enjoying waking up to each day, being content with myself, and how I got away from depression and even suicidal ideation? All of this and a lot more that I've never publicly shared about before is in this episode that is me being interviewed in the Deep End podcast with Samantha. And I would love to hear your thoughts on if you agree or if you don't agree with me in this episode down in the comments.
Welcome, Chris Dufey. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Samantha. I appreciate you, and I appreciate how there's little foreplay and how we just get to the good stuff.
Okay, so I'm definitely a sucker for foreplay, but when it comes to deep conversations, I cannot handle small talk. It bores the shit out of me, hence why we are in the deep end. So yeah, this is what always happens before we go into a podcast, by the way. Like, we have juicy pre-conversations, and I had to stop the foreplay and tell Chris, like, okay, let's just save this. Let's just hit record. So you were telling me a story about some time a few weeks ago. You were in Austin. Was that for eclipse? Were you over there for the eclipse or?
No, I think I actually just missed it. So I was there for a hunt. I was there for a hunting trip. I was there with a small group of amazing men.
Okay, so when you said hunt before, do you want to know what I thought?
What do you think?
I thought it was the male version of a witch hunt. I'm like, who are you hunting? Anyway,
Okay.
tell the story.
No, I was in the middle of nowhere land hunting animals. Yeah, we were talking about there's a lot of advice for men coming from men today that I don't agree with, which is just my opinion. And it also comes with, there was like one aspect of a lot of guys talking about being faithful, and they talk a big talk, but things change when you have to turn down 9s and 10s, for example. And when you have a certain level of value to give to the world as a man, and what a man, I think, looks to, the way I perceive this is, how do you provide, how do you protect, and how do you be in your masculine, how do you be in your feminine, how do you allow your woman to be able to be in her feminine and for her to be able to flow between those as well. Like, this is something extremely salient to me, so please do not think that I know the answers. I'm fumbling my way forward here, but it's very much a case of knowing that I am able to provide and protect in very many different ways, which actually, to tell you the truth, which was why I went on the hunting trip, was because I wanted to have that primal experience of literally stalking, hunting, killing, butchering, and putting food on the table for my family and wife to eat that I have done, because I feel like I have provided and protected in all of the other like modern arenas, but there was like this primal pull for me to want to be able to literally be able to go from I killed this animal to now it is literally a part of all of us right now, and doing that in a sacred, loving way also. And so I just feel like when it comes to how does a man show up today, I think there is a lot of mistakenly models of people there, and there's a lot of advice out there that's just not practical. Like, when I listen to something, I'm like, okay, is this useful? Is this true? Can I actually apply this to my life? How do I apply this to my life? Like, I never want to walk away from, say, listening to a podcast. For me, like, I consume a lot of podcasts and audiobooks, but for me, I never want to walk away from consuming something without at least having one tidbit for like, okay, that's a thread that I'm going to pull. That's something I'm going to use. That is like an application that I can literally do something with. Otherwise, I'm just mentally masturbating the entire time, and I'm just like actually wasting time doing that as well. So sorry, that was the kind of like train of thought that we initially started on.
I love this. And I want to speak to because I feel like yeah, it has something to do with this. Like, as you were sharing, I was reflecting on my childhood, and what I grew up watching was The Simpsons, like religiously every weekend. And the character of Homer Simpson is a very like unattractive masculine figure, in my opinion. Like, I'm not attracted to that archetype. The man who sits at home and drinks beer and works a job just to make money to put food on the table and doesn't have any drive. And I would love to hear your opinion on this, because that's my perception of that character, that archetype. Um,
Can I ask you a question before I answer?
Please, yeah.
Do you see lots of men in the world being that?
There is a culture of that in what I like to call the mainstream. Within, I stereotypically, like, this is a huge stereotype, so I don't want to like just generalize, but within the trade, blue collar, if that's even a terminology that's used these days, but within that industry, you know, when like there is that drinking culture. I grew up with that. I grew up watching my brother's friends just live for the weekend, have boys' nights, have all of these experiences where like there was just no regard for their relationships or anything like that.
My perspective, and this is just my experience and how I've become the way that I've become, and I can go as deep and as open as you want me to be. So for me, my father, there was a point in my younger years where I saw my father drinking and acting and being in a way, as a child, as a boy, I knew wasn't right. Something in me knew that wasn't right. And the language I'm about to use might be a little bit too strong, but I lost faith, and I lost my father as that guiding male role model in my life. And I have an amazing relationship with my father and both my mother today, and it is amazing. And also, FYI, both of my parents were 17 when I was born, right? So like we grew up together. So there's like, I grew up in a family where my parents were both, do you know what I mean, literally teenagers when I came into this world. We had very little money and all of these other things. What recently got uncovered, actually, I was actually on an amazing guy, David Sutcliffe. If you don't know him, go check him out. I was on his podcast when I was in Austin just before, and he, like, in a very lovingly therapeutic way, tore me apart on this podcast, right? Like, revealed all. And what came out of that was I have lacked a sense of trust in men, which what came from that fatherly wound. And what's come about was, a part of that was I've had this drive that's turned into who I am today as well, along with a ton of therapy and seeing more healers that I can poke a stick at, and shit tons of psychedelics, and trying to do to fix my own stuff as I go through this process of life. But it's been a case of, okay, like, why am I so driven? Why have I, well, like, I haven't drank alcohol in over 10 years. Do you know what I mean? I stay in this physical shape the way because I come from a place of love, but it didn't start that way. I did it because I wanted to be able to be attracted to the opposite sex, and I wanted to feel better about myself. I didn't feel like, I did not love myself. I lived the vast majority of my life not loving myself. I've gone through depression. I've gone through severe suicidal ideation. Like, I've gone through stuff I do not want any other person to have to go through as well. But also, I'm very thankful of actually going through that, because it has forged the man that I am today. So when it comes to a case of somebody might look at me and go, oh, like, typically what happens, and I find this interesting, especially in business settings, I might walk into a business mastermind or a program or something. And typically it's kind of like a big bunch of like middle-aged, rich white guys, right? I walk into, and I stand out like a sore thumb because I'm this tattooed, bearded, meathead looking kind of a guy, and everyone like takes a judgment on the cover of the book that they first see, which I actually love, because I kind of Trojan horse them in a way, because then I can kind of like pierce through, and I can actually be an intellectual, loving, connected human being at the same time. But I feel like what comes about so much is a man. I'll just speak from like a man right now, because that's my experience in this carnation of life. And it's a case of, how do I best show up as a man so that I can provide for my wife, for my 4 daughters, for my close friends, for my community, for my circle, for the people that are around me, and for myself at the same time. And it's been a case of, I had these wounds as a child that I've been able to forgive and to repair and be able to go through, that I'm very thankful for coming through this. And it comes about to a way now where I'm now, my drive right now is, I want to be the most successful man that I know. And I'm pretty close. And for me, when I truly, 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 in my heart of hearts, go, who is the most successful man that I know that I'm getting really close to being able to know that that's me, because of alignment, and because of the only person that truly knows if I have showed up the way that I best have been able to show up is me. Because I know if I say to myself, I'm going to go to the gym, and if I don't, well, then that's telling me a story. If I am in a conversation and I don't be my best, most loving, compassionate self, and I don't say the things that I'm best to, if I didn't say I love you to the person I should have said I love you, if I didn't give somebody a hug and really give them like a hug, and not kind of just like this bullshit, do you know what I mean? Kind of like little pat on the back or something like that. Like, even with a man, can I hold another man and be like, not like overdo it and kind of do it in like a over spiritual guru kind of like, I'm going to hold a hug for like 20 seconds and it gets super awkward kind of way, but like, I can actually be present with every human being. I can be present right now. I'm casting stories upon myself with every action that I do. And so for me, as I go through all of these processes, and again, why I was actually really looking forward to having this conversation, because I don't get to talk about this stuff specifically often, is because it's a very big slice of the pie of how I show up as the best man that I need to be.
I absolutely adore this. Thank you. There's a few things I want to speak to. So, you know, the 4 agreements, right?
Yep.
Then there's that chapter of always do your best. Now, a battle that I have, and I assume, I know a lot of entrepreneurs would have this battle. I'm sure you've battled this as well, right? We have such a high standard. I'm speaking collectively, but I'm also speaking to my own personal experience. I personally have such a high standard for how I want to show up. And then when I don't meet that, I go into a guilt spiral, I go into a shame spiral, and I just like, you know, descend. And my question to you is like, do you find it challenging to sustain the standard that you have for how you show up?
No.
That's amazing. How are you, is it like, are you budgeting your time and energy? Are you like, how do you sustain that standard? Tell us your secrets.
Yeah, I've got some pretty firm opinions on this. I'll use a story to highlight this. Let's say we go back to the scenario of, I'm in a context of being in a room with a bunch of other dudes or something like that, and we're out to dinner, for example. And someone will be like, oh, Chris, like, you're in really good shape. Like, just they say that. I was like, cool, thanks for the compliment, dude. And the conversation will be like, oh, like, how, like, what do you do? Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, how does someone have the word discipline will come up? And lots of people have said, Chris, you're one of the most disciplined people that I know. Now, yes, I know I have been able to cultivate a level of discipline, but I believe that what actually happens is you are able to then transcend discipline, and what truly becomes is identity. And what you really need to be able to do is, what you need is to you cultivate the identity, because you just show up the way that you show up. Me going to the gym and doing what I do, the way that I eat, the way that I work, the way that I make love, all of these things, it's all because of the identity of who I am. That's it. So there is no gap between who I want to be and who I am right now. they're exactly the same, and then there is alignment and integration between that. And as soon as there is a gap between those, that's where his pain and suffering is going to come from. That is where suffering is, because there is a gap between who you want to be and who you are right now. And so you've got to ask yourself, well, then how do I bring myself back into alignment? And that's something that I ponder, journal, and work towards very often.
Yes, it sounds like embodiment, right? Embodiment in your values, embodiment in your standards, embodiment in who you are, in your identity, which I really love. And this gap that you speak about, right? Like, I moved to the Gold Coast because I wanted to not be the smartest person in the room. I wanted to surround myself with entrepreneurs who were ahead of me. And so it's really interesting hearing you speak to wanting to be the most successful person you know. So do you just surround yourself with people like me who aren't as successful as you? I'm really joking.
No. It's actually a really good point. It's actually a really good point. Is so is it comparison that you're feeling like is an issue?
No, so where I stand, right, is I want to feel challenged by people, and like where I'm at currently with my business and what, the gap for me is like, what is actualized in my life? What have I brought from non-physical creative ideas into my physical reality? And what's that gap, right? So I've got visions and I want to create things and I want to put together programs, experiences, blah, 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 blah. There are people here on the Gold Coast doing that. There are people here, like one of my friends has her face all over billboards because she's promoting an event coming up. And so like that level is where I want to be. It's filling rooms full of thousands of people to have an impact.
Okay, no, I totally agree. So yes, I 100%, I make a very concerted effort to be the dumbest dude in the room. For example, so it was only 2.5 weeks ago, I was in this business mastermind thing, and it's just for 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs. I was there having a conversation with a friend and a mentor, and he like laid out in front of me his plan to go from 100 million revenue a year to 200 million revenue a year. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, so
like not even just 1 extra billion. We're talking 100 extra $1 billion.
Million.
Oh, million. But
Yeah,
still.
okay, that's another level as well. That's another level. So sorry, a million. Going from 100 million to 200 million revenue per year. So I very much want to be around those other people and make a very concerted effort to do so as well. But there's also a level of peace and harmony of knowing who I am and where I'm at, and not having to chase after things that I know that are not for me, and knowing that I'm on my journey. For example, a little while ago, I was in our backyard at home, and my 4 daughters, they're aged 2, 4, 8, and 10 at the moment, and they're like fairies. They're just so amazing to be able to watch them be. And then we're in the backyard. I was sitting there on the grass, patting my dog, and the girls are just like floating around, dancing, playing, doing their thing. And I start kind of daydreaming, and I'm looking at a bunch of these flowers, and I'm looking at these flowers, and I go, there's these big, beautiful flowers. I love sunflowers, are my favorite flowers, right? So if you ever want to buy me flowers, anyone, buy me sunflowers.
Good to know.
And I go, there's these big, beautiful sunflowers that are just beaming to me like they're glorious. Then there's these other ones that are starting to come up, but they're not as strong, they're not as big, they're not as beautiful. And then there's some that are just poking through the dirt. Do you mean like you can see they're just starting to poke through? And then you know as well that there's others that are even underneath the dirt. They're just the seeds right now. Now, do you ever judge and look at those flowers and think of any of less between any of those, depending on where they are? No, don't. You take them for what they are, and you appreciate them for where they are. So I do that for myself as best of my ability, and I do that for others as well. And I go, Samantha, you're on your journey, and you are your most perfect self as you are right now. Amazing. And I want to love you for who you are right now. And therefore, this is the twist. This is the hard bit for me. right? Turning that around and being able to apply that to myself. That's that for me, that's where freedom comes from. And so, like a lot of people, I say, especially entrepreneurs, okay, we use the word freedom a lot. It's like, oh, that's one of my strongest values. Would you agree with that, Samir?
%, yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's use the word freedom. Now, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that because like I use and used that word a lot, but I was like, what really is freedom? Right? Like how do I know that? Well, like what is it at the end of the day? And so for me, I actually use a model and I break freedom into two different parts. So there is freedom, D-O-M, as the ending, which is like the external things that give you the ability to do what you want. I have the money to go and buy the things that I want. I have the job that I can literally close my laptop and jump on a plane, do you know what I mean, and be anywhere in the world and continue on. Freedom, external freedom. There is the German word Freiheit, right, which H-E-I-T as the ending. Now, that word Freiheit is actually freedom, but it's the internal freedom that you have. It's the sense of peace and equanimity that we're all actually really looking for at the end of the day. And so ultimately, I believe we're really just actually looking for Freiheit rather than the external freedom things, which is why I see, especially in the entrepreneurial world, people are creating businesses and they're trying to go after and achieve things that aren't truly what they are meant to be doing to give them the ultimate feeling they want. So if you read like Rene Girard's kind of mimesis theory, for example, one of the problems, and I just try and stay cognizant of this, one of the problems is you could be surrounding yourself with people that are putting their faces on billboards and doing all of these other things, and that's amazing, and that's their journey. That's them as their sunflower in their part of their journey right now. However, is that yours, and is that what you should be going after as well? And so I use you an example, but this is what I ask myself. And I did this really like actually when I was in Austin. And I was like, hang on, what is my version of success right now in this chapter of my life? How do I best want to be showing up? How do I best want to be living? Like, what is it that I want to do as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as an entrepreneur? Like, I look at all of these different aspects and go through it. And for me, that's the concept of understanding, okay, I'm looking for Freiheit. I also want the external freedom because they're part of the two sides of the same coin. And I need to be able to be aligned with me doing what I need to be able to do so that I can best show up for myself. Because then, and this was the amazing thing, for example, that alone, sorry, not alone, but that was such a major factor in, say, for improving my marriage. Do you know what I mean? So like, I say this to try and like pull a thread to say, hey, if you have these other things over here, and if you start doing these things and taking care of yourself properly, it really does bleed into all of these other areas of your life.
Yeah. So there's like byproducts
100%.
to being disciplined. Okay. So there's so much that you're saying, and I'm like just absorbing it all and marinating in it all. And there's so much that I should be writing notes so I can remember the points that I want to make. So
it's recorded for a reason, Samantha.
I know, it's so good. There's just threads, right? There's threads. And so one of the threads that I want to pull on is, you know, the piece around discipline, right? You are disciplined when you're going. Actually, first, before we go there, because let's bookmark that. I'm telling you so we can bookmark it. How did your marriage improve, and in what ways? I think that's the same question in one. Yeah.
Yeah. I was able to show up. Probably the best thing is to ask Lauren, but my perception and story of it is I was able to show up as the best masculine man so in my family, I'm known as the mountain, right? Because I'm the masculine mountain that stands strong and is unmoved by the feminine storm that can rage around because there's 5 other female souls under the same roof. And so there's actually a beautiful artwork, and we're all like depicted as like a certain element, and I'm depicted as the element of the mountain. And so for me, it's very much being able to, I show up as the man and as the masculine, so that especially my wife was able to soften into her feminine, truly being able to do that. She was very still hanging on to masculine parts. And so in our dynamic, when I was like, she doesn't have to work anymore, I take care of the finances, everything's fully provided for, she can live and do whatever she wants in her days. And she was able to soften in the way to be like, and truly accept the abundance and this brilliant life that we've been able to create. And she was able to be like, oh my God, like I can just be the mother, and her going into her evolution as a woman now. Because also, like, there was 11 years where she was pretty much the entire time pregnant or breastfeeding, right? For like, where there was 5 pregnancies, there was a miscarriage in the middle of that. So it was 5 pregnancies over these 11 years with 4 children. And so she's been able to now blossom into this next chapter of her as this woman, and being able to do it and soften it as much as possible, which has been one of the best things for me to be able to watch. Like, just, it's been such a great thing. And so for her being able to do that, the dynamics of our relationship have just been incredible. Like, we've been married for over 12 years now. And I find it interesting because a lot of guys come to me and kind of like looking for some marriage advice and stuff like that. And I'm like, it just gets better and better as long as you show up better and better. So there was like the connection, the sex has just gotten like, it's spiritual every single time. Like, there is just no other way to be able to like put a label on it. It is just absolutely mind blowing. The way we've been able to show up for our children has just been so much better as well. So like, I feel like all the different threads of the marriage have just been able to be opened up and to be able to go deeper, and for it just to be able to expand into the way it wants to be able to expand. But also at the same time, I've got to be honest, Samantha, do you know what I mean? I also understand that she could turn around tomorrow and say, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore for whatever reason that she comes to, and that's it. So there is a finiteness, and me not wanting to take it as a given. And it is something that I need to be able to show up for and appreciate on a day-by-day level.
Yeah, I hear you in that. Yeah, I wanted to, as you were speaking, I was, wanting to come back to that point that you were sharing earlier on about like the hunters, and then what do you do when you have 9s and 10s showing up for you? And yeah, just the piece around that. So you're in a monogamous marriage, is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm seeing in you from you sharing what you're sharing is like the power of discipline, like, I don't know what you eat if you have off days or anything like that, but I definitely believe that you don't eat carbs.
I eat plenty of carbs.
I know, I'm just joking.
I do love carbs.
But like, yeah, like there's a discipline around going to the gym and showing up for your business and taking time, right?
Can I rudely interrupt? Do not lose that point. Put a pin in and come straight back to it. But I don't want to miss this opportunity to share something I think can be truly helpful, because it was truly helpful for me. And it's the discipline going to the identity thing, but I feel like the bridge between the discipline to the identity thing for me was one question, which was, if I love myself, would I ... If I love myself, would I go to the gym? If I love myself, would I eat this burger or have this salad? If I love myself, would I be fully present in this conversation or distracted? If I love myself, whatever it is. And by doing it that way, it was able to change the energy and anchoring from where things came from. Because originally it's like, as I said before, I wanted to get in shape for the egotistical reasons. But now it comes from a very different place. It might look the exact same from the outside coming in, but the energy from which it's coming from can be very different as well. And so that's where it's a case of like, on a practical, pragmatic level, it's like, what can someone be doing? Well, it's like, great, ask yourself, if I love myself, question what it is that you're about to do and see where that answer comes from. It takes, God, I could get into like a real Buddhist riff right now, but say, for example, it's like, everyone talks about awareness, right? It's like, oh, you got to be more aware, you got to be more self-aware. Yes, awareness is important, but we only want awareness because we need to have proper investigation. And proper investigation is to be able to truly look at something and to be able to know, like, is it true and is it useful? And then being able to apply it if it is needed at the right time and place as well. And so that's where it's just a case of like, for me, to kind of like put this little Rudely interruption point into the case of like, I've been able to use that question, well, if I love myself, what is it that I'm going to do? And can I stay truest to that?
Have you subscribed? If not, this is the best time for you to subscribe, whether you're on the YouTube or on the podcast. Why? Because it would be a bummer if you missed out on everything that's to come, or don't subscribe if you're not actually getting much value out of this, because there is a zillion other things that you could be doing. So I'd rather you go and do that. The ball's in your court.
I really love that. It's almost like that one of the 4 agreements of being impeccable with your word, but just being impeccable full stop, right? With who you are and how you show up. And
integrity is the word I use. I want to be
integrity, sorry. Yes, that's the word. And you really have to know yourself. I used to lie to myself, and sometimes I still do. And I think a lot of people do.
I'm a professional bullshitter. I can self-deceive myself better than anyone. I had this exact conversation with one of my partners yesterday, and she was saying something along the lines, and I was like, yeah, we're at a certain level, at being really good at, so like being intellectual, for example, you can self-deceive yourself because you can like change things around. You can reword things to be able to do it. Like, I'm a good salesperson. I'm great at marketing. Like, I can use persuasion and all of these things, and I will use it against myself as well. So I use the word bullshitting, and there is a fantastic essay by Harry Frankfurt called On Bullshitting, which talks about the difference between bullshitting and lying. And so when it comes to like self-deception, like, it's really important to stay on top of that, because I have been really good at being able to do that. Can I share something super quickly with you?
Go hard.
This was a letter that I wrote to myself. And so I say this: Dear Chris, you think you're working hard. You think all you need is your lucky break. Wrong. You haven't done what's necessary at all. You haven't made the sacrifices. You haven't put in the time. You haven't bled enough. You haven't learned the lessons. Not for when it really counts. You're delusional. Yes, you need to be delusional, some, but not too much. But you've bullshitted yourself. How do I know this? Simple. Let's use your body as an example. You said that you wanted to get in better shape, lose some weight, feel better with your shirt off. But have you done it? Can you take your shirt off and admire what looks back at you in the mirror? Have you forged the character that simply does what's needed when it's needed? No. And that is falling prey to foolishness. Foolishness is when you know what the right thing to do is, but you lack the strength of character to follow through with it. You're not foolish, you're being foolish. You want the glory, not the suffering. You want the respect, not the humiliation. So why do you not have the life, the body, the wife, the accolades, the freedom that you're telling yourself you want? Because you've self-deceived yourself. You dropped to the cultural norm. You made compromises. And it's insanity to think that you can achieve extraordinary things by doing the ordinary. Think about it. When you didn't do that extra rep, when you said, okay, just one, when your friends were having a beer, when you didn't say, I love you, when you had the chance, that sloth and torpor masquerading as self-love. It whispers to you, you deserve it, it's okay. When in reality, you don't deserve it. Not if you want to achieve the things you've not attained yet. Will you win? Will you get what you want? Life offers no promises. Life owes you nothing. But one thing's for sure. Unless you do the work, unless you step up today, unless you eliminate excuses from your vocabulary, you don't even stand a chance. That's what I wrote to myself. And I come back to that pretty frequently to kind of like check myself before I wreck myself.
Oh, wow. Brutal, but honest. Powerful, palpable. Holy shit. That's incredible. You're like, I need to hear this right now, by the way. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, um, I think about death as frequently as I possibly can because I feel like it's a fantastic framing tool. A question that I pose to myself, and I'll ask you this question, Samantha, is when you put yourself on your deathbed, just before you go into either oblivion or into the next incarnation or whatever belief that you may have, what is it that you want to say?
It's super interesting that you say this because most of my big life decisions, sometimes the small ones as well, I ask myself the question, what would my 80-year-old self say to this? What would she tell me to do?
Yeah.
I'm not on my deathbed, but I live my life for my 80-year-old self because at that point in my life, I want to look back and not have any regrets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a big question. It's not something that I can just answer. But
Does anything come to you?
pardon?
Does anything come to you?
The essence of it is that like legacy is the word that I hear, like I want to leave the world better than I found it. And so I want to ensure that like the community that I build and create and surround myself with, like I want to leave. The question you're asking me is like, what would I want to say? It's not so much anything that I would want to say, it's how I'd want to feel looking at the people around me and what I've created. Yeah. And like the material and all of that isn't really, it's amazing. And I strive for it because I want to have material things that create a life of luxury so that I can feel at ease and I can thrive. But I want to see people coming together. And if I'm on my deathbed and that's happening still to that day, I would be very happy. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, that's great. It's totally great. I read in a book that the last sense to go when dying is your hearing. So maybe the question is, what do you want to hear, Samantha?
People say about me,
Or what do you want to hear? You're about to move on. What is it that you're hearing?
celebration of life. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear people celebrating life. I want to be the catalyst for people to celebrate life, whether that is because of my death or whether that is because of my life. But ultimately, ideally, it would be both. Because of the life I've lived, it's inspirational for people to celebrate their lives moving forward, and because it has come to an end. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like when I asked myself that question, I distilled it so far down into 3 words for
Love this.
what I want to say. And I think the 3 words are wow, thank you. The wow, I get emotional thinking about it. The wow is the awe of what life has been able to give in all of its essence, like the highs, the lows, like all of the pain, all of the pleasure, like all of that being able to come through and being able to like see it all come together and be like fuck, wow. Like it's almost like it made sense that what came through. And the thank you is just gratefulness. Like, thank you for this experience. Like that was a cool fucking ride. Do you know what I mean? Like just having that actual sense of gratefulness like flow through you would be something that I think is just amazing. And so for me, it's like, can I stay true on a day-to-day level? And that's pretty minutia, but can I stay true on a day-to-day level where it leads to a wow, thank you? And can I have that wow, thank you now and not later, touch wood too soon, doing when I die?
Have you ever, that has sent me into like the feels. I don't want to skip past that part. I was about to. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I got very emotional. Even when you asked me, what do I want to hear? Like, that's an emotional question to ponder and contemplate. And it's probably an ongoing contemplation.
Mm.
You know, I was with my grandmother
Beautiful.
for her final breath. So I've been with death and I lived my life for her because she sacrificed so much for the freedoms that I now have. And that generation did. And I'm curious, like, have you been with death? Have you experienced death firsthand in that way?
So I shared earlier that my parents were 17 when I was born. When I was 18 or 19, my mother was pregnant with my sister. And I remember waking up in the morning, being at my girlfriend's house and getting ready for work. And then I got a call, and it was my dad, and he was just blubbering, and I couldn't make out what he was saying. He was crying. And I'm like, what's up? Like, what's going on? What's going on? And my mother had a miscarriage. She had a stillbirth. And she was like, I'm at the hospital. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm coming. Like, I literally dropped to my knees. And so anyway, got to the hospital, got there, saw my mum and dad. My mum was all good, very thankfully. And they were sitting there and they were like, do you want to see your sister? And I'm like, and so I forget exactly how many weeks that she would have been pregnant. And I was like, yeah, I do. And so they brought my sister out, and I remember holding her, and she wasn't even as long as my hand. And I remember her little hand being over the top of my finger. And I held her for so long that she was warm. And I just remember being there and just being like, oh my God, like this is life. Like this is so incredibly fragile, like what we have. Like to hold this, my sister in my hand, and just to be like, oh my God. And I'm really thankful for that experience because it showed me death in a really beautiful way from the beginning rather than from the end. And
Wow.
it's just something that I say, doing like it was obviously a hard experience, and obviously I have a lot of I give a lot of grace to my parents because they really went through it. Obviously going through that, like losing a daughter that way. And yeah, that's probably the experience of death for me that I feel like has stayed closest for me, and that I'm thankful for in a peculiar way as well. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. What a like contrast swing of the pendulum of life and death, like a very short life to a very long life of my grandmother. It's funny because her photo is sitting right above this. And yeah, can't imagine what that experience would have been like. Such wisdom to have learned how old were you when it happened?
I was 18.
Wow. Like that, right, you're at that prime age of like, if you were in a culture where rites of passages were celebrated, that would be it. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. I love how deep we've gone, by the way. It's been really potent and powerful. There is this thread that I want to just close around the piece around the 9s and 10s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like, so on a primal level, you experienced the hunting, right?
Yeah.
The hunting to provide and protect, and all the pieces that would have come through for that experience, from that experience. Then there's the hunter in procreating, right? which is a natural impulse and drive for a man that is also primal. And so I'd love to hear, like, and you might have said it earlier and I might have like missed it because I was so engrossed in like all of the other pieces that you were speaking to, but I'm very curious, like, what you would say to somebody who is experiencing the temptation of stepping out of alignment of integrity when it comes to women who might be throwing themselves at a man who, you know, these 9s and 10s that are throwing themselves at temptations, you know, and this is just a metaphor for like temptation in life. And I think you've answered it when you said about the gap between alignment, but that specific piece has stood out for me in this conversation. So I kind of want to bring it back to full circle.
Yep, I tell you. So last week, so we're here at Bali, and my wife and I in the mornings, we go to this gym. It's just around the corner, and there's like a sauna and ice bath and all that kind of stuff. And so in the mornings, we'll go to the gym, I'll go for a walk, and then we have like a sauna and ice bath, and then like a coffee together, and that's kind of like the little start to the day that we can have. And there was this one trainer at the gym, that female trainer at the gym, and I don't take much notice. I mean, I think I'm pretty, I just don't take much notice of that. But I did notice one time that she actually she went to walk into the change rooms, and then she saw me, and then she continued to walk, and then she saw Lauren, and then she actually just like darted in another direction. And then a couple of other things happened, and Lauren actually turned to me and she goes, "Hey, I just got to ask, is there something happening with that, like, Jermaine, that woman?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "She's all over you like an absolute rash. And if I wasn't here right now," and then, oh my God, and then, sorry, we're actually going for a walk on the beach that afternoon, and we're walking along the beach, like I'm there in my board shorts, and there was this other woman that was walking towards us, and like, she was just like staring at me. And even though Lauren was like right next to me, do you know what I mean? And then like, even like with all my daughters around me and stuff, so it's just very interesting. And Lauren like looks at me again. She's like, "What the fuck?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." So, yes, it's nice as a man to feel that, do you mean, and to have those experiences. Now, however, do I take the primal want? Can I swear?
Absolutely.
Okay. So do I take that primal want of wanting to absolutely devour and fuck these women, do you know what I mean, that is there, and do I to succumb to it? Or do I do something wiser and more noble and forge my character? So for me, seeing other beautiful women fills me with energy, right? Like, I love being able to see other beautiful women. Now, does that mean that I'm going to have thoughts of devouring that woman in all the ways that I want to, and then actually like following through with that? No. For me, I want to be able to take that energy and take the energy of even someone to me wanting to put that forth onto me, and I will use that, and I will use that the energy to be able to best for myself have energy, but then I will direct that into my own woman and into my queen. And I will direct all of that sexual passion and devourness, and I will devour my wife and make sure that she's sliding down rainbows and having the most incredible orgasms ever, and me being able to witness and participate and be a part of that is the most gratifying and beautiful thing. And that's where it's like the depth of being able to do that. Now, that's my experience as well. I do have other friends. One of my close friends I was actually on the hunting trip with, he's going through a thing at the moment with his partner where they are exploring, do you know what I mean, open relationships and all of this kind of stuff. There was another guy on this hunting trip as well, where he actually, do you know what I mean, he had a 2-year affair with another woman, and it's caused, so I've been able to see this in other spectrums and dimensions and ways it's played out in relationships as well. But for me, I use it for good. And for me, the good is being able to take that energy and to transmute that into the areas that I want to be able to transmute that into. Because sexual energy is extremely potent and powerful. And being able to wield that properly, I think is an extremely magnificent tool and skill set to be able to have, that I think a lot of men don't even want to, maybe because it's taboo and maybe because it's kind of like a little bit, I don't know what it is, but like culture doesn't open up to being able to use that energy and that focus into the ways that we need to be able to do that. And so for me, I've been able to enjoy, do you know what I mean? Like semen retention practice and being able to take other practices, do you know what I mean, that are along that sex magic, being able to take the one of being able, yeah, like I can turn down 9s and 10s and be able to make a better marriage because of that. And
Yeah.
that's more fulfilling to me.
Yeah. It sounds like, I think this is what I really advocate for, and love is containment. You know, like how can you contain the desire in such a way where you're channeling it or discerning it, or yeah, what you've just described.
So if you use the word desire, I have a belief where it's, you don't have to satisfy a desire for it to go away.
I agree. I think the temptation, because desire resides in wanting, right? And you cannot have desire if you have it. Like I don't, for example, for the lack of a better example, like I cannot desire water because I'm holding this water bottle in my hand right now. There's no desire there. I can drink it, blah, 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 right? So if you have the freedom to feel, experience all of these, whatever, the primal urges, blah, 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 like I feel like the temptation goes away, because when you take the temptation away, you have it. You can no longer desire it.
No, I disagree.
Okay.
I can have something and I can, and this is something, so this slight tangent, but I'm going to pull on this thread. I want to put as much effort, maybe if not more effort, wanting what I already have compared to wanting things that I do not have. That's gratefulness. I want to want what I have, not me going after and wanting things that I do not have, because then you're constantly creating a gap between here and the thing that you want. And that desire is a contract for unhappiness and suffering. So can I put the effort into, let's say, my wife, and I want her rather than this other woman over here, for example? I can be able to cultivate the desire for my wife and for what that is. So that's one part of it. And I think the other part of with desire and not having to satisfy a desire for it to go away is because it's just a thought. And what's a thought, Samantha?
Sometimes it's a feeling. Sometimes it's like
Yeah.
hormones, you know. But yeah, a thought is
totally
just a
get that.
thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like a thought, like, and like if I can go deep into it, like a thought, it's very interesting how our world gets encapsulated by a thought. But when you actually think about what a thought is, and like when you've done, say, like meditation practices, and you actually truly look at a thought, you can see a thought come in and you can see it dissipate and go away. And you'll be like, oh my God, like they're so fleeting, but they're so encapsulating at the same time. It's wild how that really happens. And so if you think about thoughts like clouds and they're just like passing by, just let the clouds pass by. If someone's struggling with, if it's, let's say, for example, if a dude's struggling with, oh my God, there's this really attractive women and, oh, I really want to, and maybe I shouldn't, do you know what I mean? Like, have some better awareness and self-investigation to be able to sit back and to be able to see what's going on and have a bit of a subject-object relationship between the feelings and desires that you actually have as well. Because yes, there can 100% be the chemical, do you know what I mean, primal of what is going on. And oh my God, I have this testosterone and oxytocin and all these things just like pulsing through my veins right now. But that doesn't mean I have to be out of integrity.
I love that a lot. That's such a great spin.
But also, and so this is what, so you said spins, which is interesting. So you picked that up really well. So this is kind of like reframing and being able to have different perspectives. I want to be a multi-perspectile human being. I want to be able to look at things from different perspectives. I want to be able to argue different sides of the points. So when it comes to the fact of, all right, I have a desire and I'm wanting this thing, but I need to be able to like step myself back from it. How do I best be able to do that? Like, it's a case of not falling prey to these passions that come through me straight away. And so if I use an example, like, let's use like a food example and like getting in shape and something. You're in the Gold Coast, so plenty of people will vibe with this one, right? In case of, I feel like what I was able to do was, if there's, let's say there's a bowl of ice cream out in front, right? You finish dinner and they put dessert out in front of you. Now, a lot of people, what will happen is, especially because willpower is like a battery, and especially through the day, it drains throughout the day, which is why so many people put their hand in the cookie jar at the end of the day, right? Because their desires, their willpower has been drained down, so therefore it's really easy for them to succumb to it. Now, the thing is, I believe you can actually rewire things so that you're able to get more joy and pleasure and good feels out of doing the more integrous thing than not. So you get more of a dopamine hit, you get more of a actual like good feeling out of not fucking that other woman than fucking her. So therefore, what you have done, whether it's fucking another woman, whether it's not eating the cookies at night time, whether it's reading a book instead of watching Netflix or whatever it is, you actually then create a positive flywheel effect for you to continue to do the right thing. And by continuing to do the right thing over and over, you then forge habits, and habits can then continue to forge better things, which then forges identity. And then you have the identity that then doesn't have the problem, or doesn't have as much as the problem that you did before.
I really appreciate you saying that. That was beautiful, beautifully put, so well put. And like, yeah, I resonate deeply. It's like the personal development junkie in me, or the personal growth junkie in me, who gets off on that, you know, shadow hunting and not allowing my shadows to play out, and really being conscious and aware. Like, yeah, I totally get that. And what a great spot to finish up on. Such a great
I don't
point.
think we even touched upon any of the things I thought we were going to talk about. That was wild.
I feel like what needed to come through was the authenticity. You know, we touched on some really deep stuff. So for those who are wondering, Chris does have a podcast called Christopher Dufey Podcast, and he's also on YouTube, Christopher Dufey on YouTube and on Instagram. But I will include all of your contact details on the show notes. Do you have time to share any upcoming things that you might want people to come along to, or just follow you and keep in touch, right?
Don't even follow me. Just be a kind of human being to yourself. That's all you need to do at the end of the day.
I love that. All the people who are like, don't reject me before I reject you, I'm going to follow you.
Yeah. I'm doing the old reverse psychology. Don't follow me. Don't hit the subscribe button. Don't do it. You're not allowed.
That is great clickbait. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you, and appreciate all of the pearls of wisdom you shared.
Thank you, Samantha.
And I'll catch you guys on the next episode.
If you've enjoyed this episode and it's vibed with you, then make sure that you hit subscribe, whether you're on the YouTube or on the podcast. And importantly, if there is any guests that you want me to have on the show, or specific questions or topics that you want me to be able to cover for you, simply put it into the YouTube comments or send me an Instagram DM. That way I can make sure you're getting the most out of actually being here.